revolves around me. All right, let's talk about this debate that will have me covering it. Now, among the subjects coming up is achieving prosperity. How you go about doing that depends on your perspective, whether you think things are better or we're still going to hell in a handbasket. We've got Trump economic advisor Steve Moore, the president of High Noon Strategies, Lisa Booth, Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov. Jessica, with you, begin with you. Obviously, Hillary Clinton's going to say, you know, we're not off to the races, but we are certainly off the mat. So, Donald Trump, I don't know what you're talking about. Right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly what you're going to hear, and I think that the numbers back her up. When you look at the appraisals of Donald Trump's plan, which I know Steve played a critical role in, and Steve, who I respect a great deal, you know, you look at, for instance, the Committee for Responsible Budget just appraised his plan, saying it's going to add $5 trillion to the debt. She's going to add $200 billion, so it's not like she's not spending anything. But you have a conservative out there saying he wants to double the amount of infrastructure spending that she's putting out there. There are appraisals as well that say that he's going to lose over 3 million jobs, even though he stands up there and says he's going to add 25 million and get us 4% growth, which we haven't had since there was a Democrat in the White House named Bill Clinton, and his policies were drastically different than Donald Trump's.
So I'm going to put you down as a maybe on Trump. Now, Steve Moore, I will say this, obviously, Donald Trump outlined, I'm sure with your guidance and help, that, you know, a very detailed tax plan. A lot of people say it is going to, you know, exacerbate these deficits and debt going forward, and that he has not shown how he's going to get our debt under control. What is Jessica missing?
Well, we're focused on growth, and how to get jobs back in this country. You know, Neil, if you look at every poll for the last 2 or 3 years, it's been consistent that 2 out of 3 Americans think the economy is going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. I've been saying, and I've been looking at these numbers, I know our tax plan, our energy plan, our health care plan, that we can get 5 years of a 4% growth, Jessica. That's a pretty good number if we can do that.
It's fantastic. I don't think you can.
You should explain. Guys, I also want to say you're geniuses. But yeah. I just want to make sure 4% growth. You get that kind of growth, which would be double what we've been averaging.
That's right.
Something we've not seen quite some time.
We're going to get to 4.
That brings a lot of revenues into Washington.
One other quick thing, Neil. I heard you reporting on this yesterday. You know, the latest out of Hillary Clinton, she doesn't have much of an economic plan at all, but her latest plank of her plan is to raise the death tax in the United States to 65%. That's a horrid idea. That would take 2/3 of someone's lifetime earnings in a business away from them. I can't imagine.
Right.
Yeah, but still, I mean, who
That's only Donald Trump who's going to get hurt, Steve.
No, I don't think any. Look, the principle is, should the government take 2/3 of everything that you've earned over your whole life? I don't think many Americans agree with that idea.
We'll see. I'm sure they're going to thrash that out. But Lisa Booth, let me step back and get a sense. From neither candidate do I see much of a zeal to get entitlements under control, to get general spending under control. They talk around it, but I don't see any specifics to deal with it, and we keep growing this debt and keep growing this debt. And I know I'm a numbers nerd and accounting geek, and these are the same people who didn't, you know, want to go on dates with me in high school because I was a nerd and a geek.
Oh, don't say that.
I'm thinking to myself, we are never, ever willing to be honest with the American people and just say, here's how much money we have, and here's how much money we're spending.
And Neil, I'm with you on that. I wish both candidates would address entitlement spending, and neither of them really have. But I do think that the issue here, you see, is the latest CBS battleground tracking poll, and 55% of Americans in battleground states, they want big changes in terms of the economy and in politics. And Hillary Clinton represents the status quo. And let's just take a specific issue like energy exploration. Hillary Clinton opposes the Keystone Pipeline. She has recently said that she would roll back efforts on fracking. She wants to destroy the coal industry. So those are all opportunities lost. And if you look at something like fracking that Donald Trump addressed just the other day in Pittsburgh, it's added 1.4 million jobs to this economy, $190 billion to the GDP, according to the Wall Street Journal. You know, tens of billions of dollars in reduced energy costs to Americans. And all of that could be detrimental if Hillary Clinton wants to take away those opportunities. And we've seen that under President Obama, and a president that has taken away so much federal land from energy exploration. And so what I think Americans want and desire is increased opportunities
Well, let me ask
in this
Jessica
country.
about that, Jessica, because it just bothers me on just the level. Now, I know that these death taxes and estate
Right.
taxes affect the fuel, even though she did lower the amount at which she would
Which I
start
disagree with.
at 3.5. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, over the next 10 years, she's adding more than $1.5 trillion in taxes.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not that reduces overall debt or controls it and does it, I find that hard to believe. But I'm just saying, a great creativity there to come up with ways to get more money. Zilch, zero to save it.
Yeah, no, obviously, I mean, Democrats like to raise taxes. No one's kidding ourselves about that, and she is going to raise
Why
taxes.
do they like to raise taxes? Why
Well,
don't
to
they
get the
just stop
revenue
it?
from it so that we can invest the money back in education and infrastructure.
And how has that been working? How has that been working? Kids are dumber than they've ever been. So what's the deal? I mean, you would think that doing the same thing and yielding the same results is something that would grant you an F in class.
I don't know. I mean, if you're following Bill Clinton's economic plan, which is, as I repeat again, where we got 4% growth, he did exactly that, and he invested the money back.
She's actually following Barack Obama.
No, it started with Bill Clinton, and obviously this is an extension of it.
Very
She's not
trade
just
policies
repeating
of her
it.
husband, every single one. So we can't go into the Bill Clinton analogy because she's repudiated everything he did.
No,
Neil,
it's not repudiating everything that we did. Bill Clinton had a strong program of investing in our country.
I know. I could go back in time, too. And I talk about Ronald Reagan. And don't get me started on Millard Fillmore. It's the time being.
The problem, Neil, is that if Hillary were adopting Bill Clinton's platform, I'd agree with a lot of it. The problem is, you know who she's sounding a lot like right now? Bernie Sanders. That's where she got this idea of all these tax increases. I don't think there are any rational economists who think, given the flimsiness of the economy, that raising taxes by $1 trillion right now is going to help the economy. We're going to cut the business tax for every business in America to 15%. That is a jobs gain.
Right, well, let's see what works, guys. But Lisa, the fallout here is they're going to paint Donald Trump as a friend of the rich. They're going to paint her as a big spender. And I wonder how each defends their respective position in the debate. Who's better at that?
But ironically, Donald Trump is doing really well with hardworking middle-class families.
That's for sure.
That you've seen the middle class in this country have shrunk. You look at manufacturing has shrunk, specifically in Pennsylvania, a battleground state that Trump was in just the other day. They've seen a 35% decrease to manufacturing I think since 2001, I believe. So I think that's an issue here, that Donald Trump has been or at least seen from working class families, blue-collar families, as a friend to them, as someone that recognizes their woes, recognizes their problems. Specifically, look at the coal industry. Hillary Clinton has told coal workers in America that she wants to put them out of business.
So not, play the whole clip. Play the whole clip before you do that.
And President Obama has made similar comments as well, so they are not a friend to working class families in this country.
Right, guys,
can I just quickly ask about all of these conservatives, including the two on the panel? I'm leaving you out here, Neil. People who are now anti-free trade, not for entitlement reform. I mean, Donald Trump has moved your party into a complete ideological.
Didn't I just say that? But Democrats to address entitlement spending.
Steve Moore, you love free trade. I know you do.
I'm a free trader.
Yeah. So what's going on here?
Free trade, I got you. We saved a lot of time talking over one another. Otherwise, we would never have been able to fit this in. Guys, thank you. I do appreciate it. Meanwhile, there's been this real rush, right, to swear in citizens right before the election. You ever wonder why that is? And then an update we're getting, keeping an eye on this Seattle development north of Seattle and the shooting. They are saying it's not a terrorist act. Does not appear to be an act of terrorism. More to this. On the markets in general, are you worried after a pretty quiet August? You're a pretty good investor, that we're in for a rocky fall. Everyone worries about that as we get to the fall. Are you?
Yes, absolutely, because we don't know what we don't know. I have my Trump hedge on. In the event Donald wins, I have no doubt in my mind the market tanks.
All right, that was Mark Cuban's thoughts on that. Of course, now we hear that Mark Cuban is going to be sitting in the front row, maybe to psych out Donald Trump at Monday's debate. Former GOP presidential candidate, Forbes media editor-in-chief Steve Forbes. See what he's saying. It's just the prospect of a President Trump is going to scare the you-know-what out of investors of all political stripes because they don't know what they're in for, and the market tanks. What do you think?
Well, the market always does poorly in the first year of a new president. That's been true for decades. So whether Hillary wins or Donald wins, you can expect that next year is going to be, as they say euphemistically, a challenging year. But in terms of how the markets react immediately, it's going to depend, starting tomorrow night with that debate, on what these people emphasize. Hillary Clinton is now talking about a 45% capital gains tax, something we haven't seen since the 1970s, a terrible decade, 65% death tax, and junk like that. That will tank the economy. That will tank the stock market. If Donald Trump focuses on his tax cuts and deregulation rather than having a trade war, I think she would hurt the market more than he would.
It's always hard to tell, like you say, the first year of a new administration. Many argue that this market, given its incredible run-up, has nowhere to go but down. I don't know where you stand on that. But the anxiety of the unknown. You've always reminded me over the decades we've known each other that markets abhor uncertainty, and this is an election that has a lot of uncertainty. On that alone, they're going to be pins and needles. What do you think?
Well, yes, and that's where it's going to depend, especially after the election. Say Donald Trump wins, what kind of people does he appoint to the cabinet? What kind of people is he bringing in the White House? What issues is he going to lead with when he takes the oath of office? If they're pro-growth issues like his tax plan, I think the markets may give us a pleasant surprise. The one reason why the markets are levitating now is that the profits aren't there. As you know, profits haven't grown for over 2 years, and so we need something to get this economy moving again, or the market can't keep moving up.
You know, I always hear this from either liberals or whatever, so taking sides in the issue that what's propelled this market really is the Federal Reserve. And it always says, you're not being fair to this president. But when you have near 0% interest rates, if you can't make money in that environment, with stocks, there's something wrong. That can't go on forever. So let's say the Fed does resume hiking interest rates, maybe at a regular pace, maybe an irregular pace, but the 0 days are over. Play that out.
Well, one reason why you've seen the market to do as well as it has is because of ultra-low interest rates suppressed by the Fed. That's allowed PE ratios to go up by default.
You're talking about price-earnings ratios, a key gauge of how stocks are valued. Go ahead.
Yes, it makes stocks look a better buy than when you have bonds at 5 or 10%. And so what the Fed has done inadvertently with their zero interest rates is they've hurt lending to small and new businesses, which are the job creators in this economy, which is why we've had a lousy labor market, low labor force participation rates. So if the Federal Reserve gets out of the business of trying to manipulate the economy and the markets, that overall is a good thing long term. And if you combine that with serious tax cuts, which Donald Trump is proposing, the next couple of years could be very pleasant 2 years from now for the stock market. But if she gets in, Hillary Clinton gets in, and she goes with the massive increase in capital gains. Remember, Neil, in the 1970s, the market had a terrible time. In real terms, it was down 50% when you had these high capital gains tax rates. And raising the death tax, that destroys capital as well. She wants to raise numerous other taxes. Tax increases on that scale never help the economy. Well, tax
increases went up under Barack Obama, and as much as people wince at that, market's done okay. But you could be right. I did want to get your thoughts, though, on something else real quickly with Donald Trump, and that is, and this bothers a lot of conservatives, his trade potential war policies. He says he's going to go after Ford, shipping a lot of these manufacturing jobs to make small cars in Mexico. He's going to slap a tax on them, a tariff. Governments don't pay those tariffs, of course. We do. So does that concern you?
Yes, it does. The thing to keep in mind about a tariff, it's another word for tax. So when you hear talk of a 45% tariff, that's a 45% sales tax at Walmart. Not a good thing. What I hope Trump, if he wins, and his administration use are the tools we already have at hand. We have the tools in place to deal with serious violations of trade agreements. This administration, the Obama administration, has not used those tooals very much.
But do you think he should punish American manufacturers who go abroad and make their products? That's what he's punishing.
Well, no. If that's what Ford is proposing is not a violation of any trade rule. Ford cannot make money making small cars in this country. No other manufacturer can either. So if he wants to put a tax on, then he's going to have to do one of two things. He's going to have to make small cars absolutely unaffordable in this country, or subsidize Ford and other manufacturers like Chrysler to make small, unprofitable cars in this country. You've got to walk these things through. And where the motor companies make money is on SUVs and trucks. The other ones they lose money on.
All right, we'll watch it because that's a lot of companies besides Ford that are doing just that. All right, we'll
You
watch
bet.
closely. Steve
You
Forbes,
bet.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, why would you be in a rush in the United States government? Without being cynical, they can be like the Department of Motor Vehicles, depending on where you live. It could take a while. You have to have all the forms of ID. So why, when it came to swearing in as citizens, folks who didn't have all their paperwork together, well, why do that? What was behind that rush? And furthermore, to do it before the election, what could that be about? After this. All right, have you ever gone to the Department of Motor Vehicles in New Jersey, where I reside? You need, I think, what is it, guys, 7 forms of ID? And if you have just 6, you have to, scoot down the bench. They're not going to take you. Let's just say that it sort of seals an impression. Some, not all, have. When it comes to the government, there's no big rush, period, for anything, except when it comes to making citizens those who have not completed their paperwork. Stories out now that Homeland Security, with a lot of explaining to do, that hundreds of such applications were rushed before the election with imploring emails saying, let's get this done before the election. Why would that be? The cynics read into that and say, well, maybe they're trying to get some votes before the election. But who are we to be so cynical? Former Republican Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown, and what he reads into this. It is weird, Senator. We're not getting a lot of clarity for this. All I do know is when it came for conservative groups trying to get tax-exempt status some years back, there was no big rush at government to see that happened, particularly the IRS. In this case, big old rush. What's going on?
Well, Neil, you know what's going on, and so do the American people. They know what's going on. You have a situation where, once again, the federal government is facilitating, helping, I think, a particular party gaining a tactical advantage before an election. The fact that I know and you know that when the government wants to do something, they can do it very quickly. And when they want to stop things, they can also do that very effectively. In this instance, it's clear what's happening. You have, when I was listening to it, I said, oh, I picture someone in a back room. Oh, you're from Syria? We don't know who you are. Bang, approved. Oh, you're from Afghanistan? Bang, you're approved. I mean, it's ridiculous and it's dangerous to our national security.
Do you buy the argument that some have had that this is just a way to seek votes, because they come back and say, well, wait a minute, I mean, a few hundred people is not going to turn the tide of an election. You say what?
Well, listen, I say that a few hundred votes is a few hundred votes. Is it going to affect the national election? No. But it goes to a mentality that there are 2 sets of rules, one for the government and one for everybody else. When you and yours are in New Jersey waiting in line, and I've been in that situation, and everybody else watching has too, and you don't have the right documentation, see you later. Come back, go all the way home and get it. But in this instance, you haven't filled the forms out correctly. You don't have the proper identification. You don't have the proper references. Oh, come on in. We'll take care of you. It's just the beginning, and it's systemic. To the fact that President Obama is actually circumventing the rules that are in place right now, and also moving people ahead, like 3.5 million people, if my memory serves me, who are following the law, who are in line now, and once again, they're being pushed to the back of the line, and that's not right.
I always get nervous, Scott, when I'm at the DMV and they're playing CNN in the background. I said, this is going to be a long day. It's just going to, ID or not. All right, let me, though, get a better sense of how we are checking on these refugees, because we're getting all this dust up. The same week it's revealed that better than 800 slipped through the system under our conventional immigration process and got their clearance and became United States citizens without all their paperwork. So it gives me pause that when they say they go through exhaustive means to get these folks checked out, that this happens.
Listen, Neil, don't believe it. And whoever did it, and whoever let that so-called 800 people who are going to be deported are now all of a sudden citizens and entitled to all the rights and privileges of citizens. The legal question is, I'd love to hear Judge Napolitano talk about it, is can you now strip that citizenship from these people because it was granted by a mistake?
I'm told you can't. I'm not a lawyer. I'm told you can't. You can't reverse it.
Yeah, of course. So here we go. We have people who were going to be deported, who hadn't followed the rules, who may be bad actors, are now U.S. citizens. So they're going to ultimately go through. Have you heard, by the way, of anybody getting fired for this mistake? Of course not. It's just another way to, kind of screw the American people and give others who are not following the law, going ahead of, once again, those 3.5 million people who are in line waiting to do the right thing. You know, it's just people shake their head, and that's why they want change in Washington. That's why this election is coming out as it is.
Let me ask you a little bit about the debate. I'd be remiss, you have a couple of developments.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
Ted Cruz, he is now belatedly decided to back Donald Trump, and then these revelations that Hillary Clinton has, of all people, Mark Cuban sitting in the front row, maybe to psych out Donald Trump. So the pressure's building on substantive and silly levels. But what do you make of all this right before the big debate?
Sure. Well, I'll be at the debates for Fox. I'm going to be on your show as well, so I'm looking forward to that. And I think Dick Morris should be right next to Mark Cuban, so he can be looking up at Hillary. I'm hopeful that Donald Trump basically ignores Mark Cuban. I know Mark Cuban. He's obviously a very successful, intelligent guy, but clearly he has this, he has this person he's going to support.
Well, do you think Trump should put someone in the front row to agitate? Right? But seriously, I mean, someone who would really get his go, or her go.
Yeah,
Dick Morris is your choice, I guess.
It would be. I've been in 21 races, Neil. I've done some pretty big debates, and they've tried. The Democrats did the same thing. They put all the haters, all the Scott Brown haters in the front row, and it actually emboldens me, and I'm sure it will embolden Trump to say, you know what, regardless of what you're going to try to do to me, I'm going to win this debate.
But can you see them? I mean, the lights are so bright. I
you can see them.
The guys in the studio right now.
Now, depending on the lighting, but you can usually see the front row because that's usually where your family is located. It's going to be a fascinating debate. Okay. I'm looking forward to it, as you are.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Great seeing you again. And I can see the guys in the front row. They've all left. They're just all left. Thank you, Senator. All right, we've got Kevin Corke back in Washington. We're dedicating that African-American museum. Things are running a little behind schedule here, but boy, oh boy. Kevin, I was looking at this guest list and peeking at some of the shots. It's a who's who crowd, huh?
Boy, you're not kidding. Let me tell you, we were just serenaded not long ago by Patti LaBelle. We've been able to hear from Stevie Wonder, Will Smith, Oprah Winfrey, a cast of real luminaries from arts and entertainment as well as politics. We also heard former President George W. Bush as well as former First Lady Laura Bush, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, among those who have been able to speak here today on this momentous occasion of American history. And I specifically say American history because while this is a museum that will celebrate the history and the culture of African American history, it really is an American story, Neil, and we continue to await the appearance of the President of the United States. As I step back here just a second, I see that he is still not yet taking the stage, but when he does, of course, we will have that for you, Neil.
Do we know, Kevin, whether he is going to speak on the developments in Charlotte and the timing of this, or is he going to keep that out of it?
I'm going to make a guess. I would say he probably won't directly address what has happened, but I do think it would be fair to say that based on what we have seen him do in the past, he'll make a passing mention because this is, I think, a great example of the progress that this country has made and yet the long road ahead. So I would say his prepared remarks probably won't specifically address it, but I would be shocked if he didn't make at least a passing comment about the fact that we continue to have struggles all over this country, whether it's in law enforcement, communities coming together or being pulled apart, quite frankly. He will probably say something about that. But as far as his prepared remarks are concerned, I think he's got about 10 minutes or so. But you know how the president is. He'll get up here and he'll get a little loose, feel a little good, probably go about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll see how long it goes, Neil.
I think the under and over, you're about right on that. Kevin, you mentioned this earlier, but for people who missed it, this is not deemed to be a political event. Hillary Clinton is there, but in her role as a former First Lady, not as a presidential candidate, which explains, they say, why Donald Trump wasn't invited. Is that right?
Yeah, I have not seen the Clinton family. I know that on the schedule they mentioned the Bush family would be here, obviously the First Lady and the President would be here, but I didn't see the Clintons mentioned. Now, again, that's not to say they weren't invited. They have been a very important part. I think African Americans across this country would tell you they've been an important part of this community. And yet, you're right, because of the political angle and the perception, I've not seen them here on the stage, so I'm not certain actually if they're here in the crowd or not. Perhaps she's still doing debate prep. But I should point out that Hillary Clinton's name was mentioned, Neil, as sort of a cast-off as Patti LaBelle was wrapping up her beautiful song here today.
All right, now much is made of politics in this environment, and they want to keep that out outside of the Patti LaBelle thing. I mean, has it come up?
I have not noticed anyone really specifically mention that, although I think as we get deeper into the program, there's a pretty good chance that someone will mention the fact that this is, as you've heard, people have said on a number of occasions, the most consequential election in your lifetime. So might it get political? It's possible. Should it get political? Probably not. I think this is not the forum for that. I think this is really a forum to celebrate the magnificent opening of an important building and an American story that includes the African-American community and the broader community as a whole. But that said, you never know in an election year, my friend. I'll be watching and I'll be listening very carefully as the comments continue to roll in.
Yeah, we're moments away from hearing from the president. But, Kevin, of course, this has been a crazy week for politics. And I think when I'm watching the Obamas sitting next to the Bushes, of course, diametrically opposed on policies, they've become good friends. And if, let's say, Donald Trump were to become president, sometimes I have a hard time picturing those two, that is, the Obamas and let's say, sitting with the Trumps, if that were the case. It's tough to do, you know?
Boy, you can only imagine. Hey, Neil, I've just heard that the president is on his way up to the stage along with the First Lady. I'll step aside, my friend.
Thank you very much. All right, now the dedication formally now of the President of the United States to this latest Smithsonian institution.
Thank you. James Baldwin once wrote, "For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it always must be heard." For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it always must be heard. Today, as so many generations have before, we gather on our national mall to tell an essential part of our American story, one that has at times been overlooked. We come not just for today, but for all time. President and Mrs. Bush, President Clinton, Vice President Dr. Biden, Chief Justice Roberts, Secretary Skorton, Reverend Butts, distinguished guests, thank you. Thank you for your leadership in making sure this tale is told. We're here in part because of you and because of all those Americans. The Civil War vets, the civil rights foot soldiers, the champions of this effort on Capitol Hill, who for more than a century kept the dream of this museum alive. It includes our leaders from Congress, Paul Ryan, Nancy Pelosi. It includes one of my heroes, John Lewis, who, as he has so often, took the torch from those who came before him and brought us past the finish line. It includes the philanthropists and benefactors and advisory members who have so generously given not only their money but their time. It includes the Americans who offered up all the family keepsakes tucked away in Grandma's attic. And of course, it includes a man without whose vision and passion and persistence we would not be here today, Mr. Lonnie Bunch. What we can see of this building, the towering glass, the artistry of the metalwork, is surely a sight to behold. But beyond the majesty of the building, what makes this occasion so special is the larger story it contains. Below us, this building reaches down 70 feet. its roots spreading far wider and deeper than any tree on this mall. And on its lowest level, after you walk past remnants of a slave ship, after you reflect on the immortal declaration that all men are created equal, you can see a block of stone. On top of this stone sits a historical marker, weathered by the ages. And that marker reads, General Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay spoke from this slave block during the year 1830. I want you to think about this. Consider what this artifact tells us about history, about how it's told, and about what can be cast aside. On a stone where day after day, for years, men and women were torn from their spouse or their child, shackled and bound and bought and sold and bid like cattle, on a stone worn down by the tragedy of over 1,000 bare feet. For a long time, the only thing we considered important, the singular thing we once chose to commemorate as history with a plaque, were the unmemorable speeches of two powerful men. And that block, I think, explains why this museum is so necessary. Because that same object, reframed, put in context, tells us so much more. As Americans, we rightfully pass on the tales of the giants who built this country, who led armies into battle, who waged seminal debates in the halls of Congress and the corridors of power. But too often we ignored or forgot the stories of millions upon millions of others who built this nation just as surely, whose humble eloquence, whose calloused hands, whose steady drive helped to create cities, erect industries, build the arsenals of democracy. And so this National Museum helps to tell a richer and fuller story of who we are. It helps us better understand the lives, yes, of the president, but also the slave, the industrialist, but also the porter, the keeper of the status quo, but also the activist seeking to overthrow that status quo, the teacher or the cook alongside the statesman. And by knowing this other story, we better understand ourselves and each other. It binds us together. It reaffirms that all of us are American. That African American history is not somehow separate from our larger American story. It's not the underside of the American story. It is central to the American story. That our glory derives not just from our most obvious triumphs, but how we've wrested triumph from tragedy, and how we've been able to remake ourselves again and again and again in accordance with our highest ideals. I, too, am American. The great historian John Hope Franklin, who helped to get this museum started, once said, "Good history is a good foundation for a better present and future." He understood the best history doesn't just sit behind a glass case. It helps us to understand what's outside the case. The best history helps us recognize the mistakes that we've made and the dark corners of the human spirit that we need to guard against. And yes, a clear-eyed view of history can make us uncomfortable. It'll shake us out of familiar narratives. But it is precisely because of that discomfort that we learn and grow and harness our collective power to make this nation more perfect. That's the American story that this museum tells. One of suffering and delight. One of fear, but also of hope. Of wandering in the wilderness and then seeing out on the horizon a glimmer of the promised land. It is in this embrace of truth, as best as we can know it, in the celebration of the entire American experience, where real patriotism lies. As President Bush just said, a great nation doesn't shy from the truth. It strengthens us. It emboldens us. It should fortify us. It is an act of patriotism to understand where we've been. And this museum tells the story of so many patriots. Yes, African Americans have felt the cold weight of shackles and the stinging lash of the field whip, but we've also dared to run north and sing songs from Harriet Tubman's hymnal. We've buttoned up our Union blues to join the fight for our freedom. We've railed against injustice. For decade upon decade, a lifetime of struggle and progress and enlightenment that we see etched in Frederick Douglass's mighty leonine gaze. Yes, this museum tells the story of people who felt the indignity, the small and large humiliations of a whites-only sign, or wept at the side of Emmett Till's coffin, or fell to their knees on shards of stained glass outside a church where 4 little girls died. But it also tells the story of the black and white youth sitting alongside each other, straight-backed, so full of dignity, on those lunch counter stools. The story of 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, pigtails, fresh pressed dress, walking that gauntlet to get to school. Tuskegee Airmen soaring the skies, not just to beat a dictator, but to reaffirm the promise of our democracy and remind us that all of us are created equal. This is the place to understand how protest and love of country don't merely coexist, but inform each other. How men can proudly win the gold for their country, but still insist on raising a black gloved fist. How we can wear an I Can't Breathe t-shirt and still grieve for fallen police officers. Here's the America where the razor-sharp uniform of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff belongs alongside the cape of the Godfather of Soul. We have shown the world we can float like butterflies and sting like bees. That we can rocket into space like Mae Jemison and steal home like Jackie. Rock like Jimmy. Stir the pot like Richard Pryor. Or we can be sick and tired of being sick and tired like Fannie Lou Hamer. And still rock steady like Aretha Franklin. We are large, Walt Whitman told us, containing multitudes. We are large, containing multitudes, full of contradictions. That's America. That's what